Welcome to a special edition of What Catholics Believe, a very brief edition dealing with the matters at hand. Just recently, Francis has fired, you might say, Bishop Strickland from the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. And this has raised quite a storm of controversy. Why? Well, it's puzzling because this issue had been brewing for quite some time. And there was definitely some opposition between Bishop Strickland and Francis. No doubt about it. It reached a head recently, and Francis asked Bishop Strickland to resign. He declined to resign, so Francis, in fact, basically demoted him or fired him from the position as head of the diocese and appointed someone to administer the diocese temporarily in his place. Now, this, as I say, has generated an enormous amount of controversy, but about the same time that Francis sacked Bishop Strickland, he also came out with new directives for his Pontifical Academy of Theology. He said that the Pontifical Academy of Theology had to actually devise a new theology, a new method of theology, a method of theology which Francis called inductive theology. And Francis said the result of this new theology would produce a theology without a Christian face. Of course, this also raised an enormous amount of controversy. What kind of theology could the Catholic Church have that would not have a Christian face or the face of Christ to it? And so this raises questions that have been percolating for quite some time, and that is, what exactly is Francis's faith? There are those who say the track record that Francis has, going back to his early days, even demonstrate that he does not have the Catholic faith. But I don't know of anyone who has actually addressed the question, well, what faith does he actually have? What is Francis's faith? Well, we've repeatedly heard and seen Francis just rejecting the very concept of doctrine and dogma as being too rigid, because he believes that truth, notably truth about God, truths of faith, as he calls it, must develop and must evolve with time in order to keep pace with the modern world, in order to be relevant and dialogue with the modern world. As he recently said to the Pontifical Academy of Theology, its members, that modern theology has to interpret the gospel in a modern way for modern man. So he has rejected the very idea of an unchanging doctrine or unchanging dogma. In fact, the very concept of doctrine is anathema to him, as he himself has stated. Now, also, Francis has said rather famously in his dialogue with the Imam in Abu Dhabi that God wills all the different religions. Recently, Francis met in the audience hall of Paul VI in the Vatican, leading 7,000 children, school children, in the chant that nature is our future, nature is our future, and who destroys nature destroys us. This was an actual chant that Francis was leading these children in. And it's at the same time speaking nothing about faith in Christ, salvation of their souls. It's all about nature and climate change, following his famous or infamous encyclical Laudato Si and what came after that. These things harp on truly a kind of animistic concept of nature, in which nature has a personality of its own and a consciousness of its own. In fact, Francis has repeatedly referred to Mother Earth, especially with regard to the Synod on the Amazon. The whole literature produced about the Synod on the Amazon spoke of the Amazon as a living thing, not just a biosphere, but actually biologically as a living thing, a living organism, as it were. Its rivers, its forests, its animal life, the fauna and the flora, are referred to as kind of a living thing. And again, this plays right into the ancient pagan idea of the spirits that inhabit the earth, and they inhabit the various life forms of the earth, and so on. Very much a part of Francis's thinking and a lot of his teaching. We know that Francis invited Pachamama to have a central place. Actually, he enshrined it in front of the bishops who met with him. He enshrined the image of Pachamama before them during that synod, during the deliberations of the synod. And he allowed, actually, more than allowed, the image of this pagan goddess who has received the lives of so many children put to death in her or its honor, and to appease Pachamama, the earth goddess of the Amazon. He actually had this image worshipped. And when the image was taken from the church Santa Maria in Transpontina, the Carmelite church there on the great street leading up to St. Peter's itself, then Francis apologized for that. He was very upset about that. He apologized that to the world and to the native and indigenous peoples who worship Pachamama, as though some crime had been committed against the Mother Earth goddess. Francis has repeatedly talked about the Mother Earth as being hurt and angry by pollution and other atrocities committed against Mother Earth. Certainly, Francis has distinguished himself in so many ways of having an affinity for paganism. People certainly haven't forgotten by now the fact that Francis received a witch's stang, a witch's staff, offered to him by two young women occultists. In fact, one was kneeling before him with the Kabbalist, the red ribbon of Kabbalism, the Jewish Cabal, on her wrist as she presented the stang, the witch's staff, to Francis. He received it very gratefully. But not only did he receive it, he actually carried it into the opening liturgy of the World Youth Synod. He carried it in procession for opening liturgy. And this was in place of the crucifix, in place of the cross. He carried a witch's stang in the procession on the way to the table for the first liturgy, opening the Synod on Youth. And so those who are paying attention realize there's something very, very strange going on with Francis, and something very unpapal, so to speak. Okay, it has actually become rather obvious to all that Francis does have a faith, and he does have a religion, but it's not the Catholic faith, and is not the Catholic religion, which he explicitly rejects, repeatedly rejects. What religion does Francis have? Francis meets all the requirements of being a Neo-Paganism, a Neo-Pagan. He actually professes the religion of Neo-Paganism. If one begins to study Neo-Paganism, which is simply a modernized form of paganism, addressing modern man, as Francis insists we must do, one sees there the religion of Francis. This is what he is standing for. This is what he is actually trying to impose now through his new synodal church and a new synodal religion, which actually draws from the people what the faith should be, because the people are in contact with the earth, with the world, and that's where the true faith, that's where the true God is to be found. He is to be found in nature. If we were to describe Neo-Paganism, it would basically be modern nature worship, worshiping the forces in nature, even the spirits in nature. And that appeals to modern man. This Neo-Paganism that Francis believes, professes, and really wants to impose is a religion that some academics today have actually said would be the perfect religion to go with Marxist philosophy. And even there, Francis seems to meet the criterion as a neo-pagan, because he has been accused by many of being Marxist in his thinking. Francis has denied that, but there are various schools of Marxism, and they certainly do seem to apply. The Marxist thought certainly seems to apply to Francis in his ongoing battle against what he calls capitalism and his promotion of socialism and socialists. And so we see that even in his Marxism and his socialistic bent and his almost socialistic crusade in the world, we find there also a religion of neo-paganism which corresponds perfectly to his own Marxist philosophy. I think we have to face the fact that Francis is not only not a Catholic, but that he actually does have a false religion. He is the pontiff of a false religion, and that is a pagan religion modernized to appeal to modern man, neo-paganism. Francis is a neo-pagan. There's no doubt about it. I hope there can be some meaningful and, as I say, serious discussion about this very fact, because it's important to identify the religion that Francis wants to impose upon the world through the Vatican as an agent of the globalists and the one world society, which is going to be calling for a one world religion. And Francis's neo-paganism is really made to order. Not made in heaven, but made in hell. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Please pray for the church. Pray for all. Pray for the conversion of Francis as well, and those who are unfortunate enough to follow him. Take care. Good night.